sponsored by Model Makers Workshop. Need parts for your next model project? Model Makers Workshop has you covered with the best aftermarket accessories around. And by Gallery, your one-stop shopping for all your airbrush needs. Hello, and thank you for tuning in to the Model Building and Retirement channel. This is Ken. This is going to be part one of a multi-part episode where I'm going to do a build out of the AMT 1960 Ford Starliner, and I'm loading this up with a lot of 3D parts. So I'm going to have a Ford small block 3D printed engine under the hood, and I'm going to put some big massive 24-inch wheels in the back and 22s in the front, and slam the body way down low and do a custom paint job on it. So one of my more extensive builds to date. So in this episode, we're going to do the unboxing, and then I will also have all the prep work of the 3D parts, the prep work, the priming, the painting, and the assembly. And that ties up this entire episode. And then the next episode is going to be the body modifications to slam it down and get those big wheels to fit up inside of it. Make sure the engine fits in the engine compartment, body prep and paint. And then the next episode after that, we'll be working on the interior and assembly of the model. So it's going to be multi-part. So stay tuned. Let's get to the unboxing. Okay, so it is time for our next build. And it's going to be the AMT 1960 Ford Starliner. And yes, folks, I did pay $32.99. I don't know why. I just had to. And I don't know about you guys, but I kind of classify this 60 Starliner with the Edsel. It's sort of so ugly that you gotta love it. Like, I've never really been attracted to the car, but I think it's cool just nonetheless. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's how I feel about it. So this is a round 2 re-release from 2025. Called the Custom Cruisers model kit, so you can build this a couple different ways. Got 118 pieces to the model. So let's open it up and see what we got inside. I like the box art. Okay, so we start out with a chrome tree. And just by the looks of it, it looks like it'll have separately applied glass for the headlights, which I do like that feature. Got some nice, like, torque thrust wheels with it there. Side pipe, chrome exhaust, some chrome engine parts. Looks pretty good. Looks like some decent mirrors where you can pin those into place. Separately applied windshield wipers. I need to get a bunch of those. Okay, then we got our glass. So we got some clear red for the taillights, and then we got our windshield back window and separately applied headlights. Okay, then we got our body and chassis. So chassis's got floor pans in it, you know, fairly nice looking. So it looks like we'll have separate exhaust, we'll have separate suspension, rear end, and all that stuff. So that ought to probably look pretty nice. Tell you what, the body itself looks like it's in pretty clean condition here. They must have cleaned up their molds or something. A little bit of flash, a little bit of mold lines there. So not too bad for cleanup though. Okay, then tires. Okay, so it comes with white wall tires. Haven't decided if I'm gonna, I think I'm gonna probably be doing something aftermarket, but we'll see. Okay, then we got interior pieces, so you get your back seat and your door panels, rear suspension parts, hood, gas tank, trunk, more suspension, inner wheels with drum brakes in them attached, front bench seat. Okay, we got our firewall, radiator support, engine block, and dashboard and whatnot. Some radiator hose, and looks like maybe suspension pieces there. Got our main frame, rear end, and it looks like a alternator or generator maybe. decal sheet. Okay, so it comes with some crazy looking side stripes and flames and whatnot. Interesting. I haven't done that in a while, you know. I haven't gone for a model that actually, you know, had all that art. So we'll see. We'll see. I haven't really decided yet exactly what I'm going to do with this, but I am thinking resto mod for sure. Street machine. Okay, then we got our instruction sheet, and once again, it looks like one of those old AMT simplified instructions. Yep. Not real detailed, but tells you what you have to know, so. All right, very good. Okay, so we did the box opening here. And you know, it's weird too, because I have a pretty good stash going on, but I just bought this the other day. So sometimes when I pick a model, you know, I mean, I've got stuff that I thought was really cool 6 months ago that are still sitting on a shelf or whatever. I'm sure some of you guys got stuff for years, but you know, this one I just grabbed the other day, and I decided I was going to go for it. And I figured I was going to let this vision just come to me. So I haven't got it all sorted out yet, but I'm going to load it up with aftermarket parts. So compliments of Model Maker's Workshop. Got a lot of 3D parts here. I've had these low profile oversized wheels for a while. And, you know, being old school, I'm not a real big fan of low profile tires, but I know you can make a car look pretty darn good that way. You can slam it and put some oversized wheels on it. So no matter what it takes, I'm going to commit to using those up on this kit. And then I've got a Ford small block V8 and a Ford automatic transmission. And then I haven't decided which way I'm going to go yet, whether I'm going to go full stock. But this is a performance pack, add-on pack, where you could, you know, it's an engine dress-up kit, essentially, oil pan and stuff like that, a little bit better looking parts. But also there is another twin turbo pack here, so I just haven't decided yet. And then I have this little tiny accessory pack, which is a power steering and AC add-on. So if you're going to do a resto mod, I'm sure it's going to have those things on it. So I've got to sort all that out yet. So there's going to be some heavy modifications needed. For example, these wheels, you know, they're going to have to be tucked up under there to get the stance right. But this car has inner fender wells and stuff, so that wheel is all the way up. I don't really care for that, so I'm going to have to do some modification there. We'll look at that as we go, but a couple options are opening up the wheel well and exposing the tires, which would look good on the outside, but not so good on the inside. Another option is to possibly shave the top of the tire down, cut the top off and glue it up in there to slam it a little bit. So I'll have to figure that out. The back one, kind of the same thing. I'll probably have to widen the frame area here because it doesn't quite fit in there. So a little bit of modification there as well. And then, of course, the engine compartment. You know, who knows? You know, you might have to cut the firewall. You might have to shave down stuff on the inside. So a lot of modifications come into play when you start playing with the aftermarket stuff. And I find it challenging. You know, there's going to be a point, maybe it's the next kit, where I'm going to go for easy, just for a break. But first I want to muck up the tires and wheels, and let's see what that looks like. So the first part of the process in preparing your 3D parts is to inspect them, obviously, and then pull them out of the bags. And some of the parts are already off the supports, but some of the parts are shipped still on the supports because there's so many small little details that they might get damaged in shipping. So in the case of the engine here, you can see that that's all still on the supports here. So that's all going to need to be broken away. Additionally, the parts are cleaned when they come off the printer and cured, but just to be extra safe, it's a good idea to rewash your parts. And you could use anything from Dawn dish soap to isopropyl alcohol. I prefer the isopropyl alcohol because typically I'm going to be preparing to paint right after sorting and cleaning, and I'm going to want the parts to be dried, so this will evaporate quicker. I'll usually just take a little container like that, and I'll pour some isopropyl alcohol, and anything from 70 to 90% is safe. On the very delicate stuff, you got to be a little more careful, but on bigger stuff like this block here, you just carefully, it's on this support, so this is pretty rigid. All these little things break off pretty easy. So like on the block, for example, you just kind of grab it and twist. It makes a really weird little noise. And it breaks off. Now it's just a little bit cleaned up, because if you look down like in the cylinder heads, you see a little bit of those supports in place, and the bottom where you just broke it off, it's kind of prickly. So we're going to want to be sanding all that down before we go to prime and paint, so that parts fit together really nicely. So once again, you know, I'm not going to do all these on camera, but like the oil pan here, I'm just kind of twisting it and breaking it away. So when you get to the fan, like for example here, I get a little more nervous about that. So you can cut it away with your sprue cutters, and those little supports are kind of brittle. They go flying everywhere. But that gets them cut off pretty easy, and most of them break away while you're slicing and cutting. Because this, I would be afraid to just grab and start twisting off. You can very easily break off one of those fan blades. Same with the exhaust here, because this stuff is fragile. It's more fragile than the diving from your kit. But like now, once you got it off, you could just with your finger kind of peel and break the back sides off where the supports are. So I'm going to get all this stuff broke off the supports, and then we'll be back. Okay, so I got the small block parts that I want to use cut off and put in this little cup here. Now they're not cleaned up yet, but they are ready to, or they're not cleaned up with sanding or anything yet, but they are ready to clean up. So I'm going to put just a little isopropyl alcohol in there. And supposedly they're cleaned up pretty well from the manufacturer, but anyways, I do want to explain just how careful you got to be though, because even though I was being careful and using like my sprue cutters, everything's quite brittle. So for example, I had a couple options of a fan, but I broke off one of the fins. Now the parts go flying, so if you can find it, you might be able to super glue it back together, but mine went flying and it's in who knows where land, so never to be seen again. And another example is this alternator. The alternator came with a nice detailed bracket, so it didn't have to be a hanging in space alternator like model kits typically do. But unfortunately, that bracket was very delicate, and removing it from the supports, it went flying and broke off too. So unfortunately, I'm not going to find that either. So it is what it is. And a lot of these engine kits will give you options. For example, this had 2 4-barrel carburetor options, so I elected to, I haven't decided which ones I'm going to use, so I am cleaning them in my little bowl here. But it has a 2-barrel setup. Well, you know, I'm not going to do a resto mod with a 2-barrel. It has a 2-barrel intake manifold, which I'm not going to use. And then you get various valve cover options. So I have one that says Cobra and one that has the Ford Oval, and I hadn't decided yet which one I'm going to do. So I'm going to break off this one, and it is kind of hard to break, so I'll get my sprue cutter out here again and kind of get it started. Once you get under there, it snaps off pretty easy. So I have a Ford Cobra one and one with the Ford Oval emblem on it. So the rest of these, I'm gonna, you know, maybe in the future I'll use them, or maybe I'll do a junkyard diorama, or just extra parts on a shelf in your diorama or whatever. So I'm gonna save those. I'm just not gonna paint them right now because it's enough of a chore to paint all your little parts in the first place, let alone painting stuff that you don't need. Okay, what I'm gonna do is, then they give you your performance packs here. So you look them over, and once again, you get more valve cover options. And these will fit the 351 because these are add-on kits. So these will fit the engine that I'm cleaning. So if I like the look of those, I can cut them off You get to some different air cleaners, like aftermarket, like if you went to a race shop back in the day and wanted to do engine dress-up kits or whatever. Different heads and headers, okay, instead of regular exhaust manifolds. And a couple carburetor choices. And then we're going to get to our, what else do I got? Small block power steering and AC. Okay, so once again, this should fit with your pack too. Okay, so what's that give you? It gives you more fan belt stuff because you're going to need that for your accessories. So I'm going to throw that in my cleaning solution. You got your AC compressor here and your power steering reservoir. And then once you got your parts in your little wash alcohol bin here, you know, there's a couple things you could do. You could pick them all out of here one by one with tweezers, put them out on a paper towel or something. But I have these little shells for my dehydrator. So I'm going to be able to pour my alcohol and reuse that. And just let this stuff dry. So I'm just going to set that aside and let that evaporate. Okay, so once you've cut your pieces off your supports, the backside where the supports were, it's going to feel and look prickly, and I'll have a picture that better defines that. I marked a couple of them with a black marker. The rest of them are unmarked, but I think you can still see them in that picture. So when you go to fit something with those little pricklies still showing, that's going to get in the way. And as brittle as this stuff is, it's still soft. It's soft but brittle, if that makes sense. So what you could do is you could take some little sandpaper here, and I think this is 800 grit right here. And I just have it super glued to a little piece of a popsicle stick here. But all you got to do, I'll put it right down on my paper here. Hold it down. Doesn't take much. Now you don't want to breathe this powder because this resin could be bad for you. Okay, see how easy that sanded? That sanded away. It turns into like a dust. And you can either use it on a stick like this, or you can... Also, I have these little sanding sticks that I got. I believe I got these at Hobby Lobby. And they got a more coarse sanding grit on one side and a softer sanding grit on the other side. But they're flexible, and like for the back side of this blower here, you can get in there a little bit better and just sand away. Now the top side doesn't need anything because there were no supports. Sometimes on the side you might see some supports, but it's not very strong. Okay, so this piece is all cleaned up, so you would do that to all your parts. Now, one thing very important with the 3D printed stuff is you cannot just paint over it like you can on plastic. I mean, I know most of us are priming our plastic, but we can spray right over plastic. Like if you're doing an interior or whatever, oftentimes I won't prime that. I'll go right with some Tamiya colors or whatever, and it sticks fine. But this 3D resin, even though you don't see it, it sort of absorbs the paint and kind of sucks it in, if you will, almost like a paper towel does to a spill. So priming it is highly advisable. And it depends on what you're going to be top coating with, but you can use anything. You could use water-based primers. You could use solvent-based primers, lacquer primers, enamel primers, Mr. Surfacer, Kaleidos, water-based stuff. They're shiny primer, they're dull primer, they're white, they're black, it doesn't matter. But let that primer go on there first and let that cure up before you go to a color. And that way it's not going to absorb into the paint. The primer will work as sort of a sealer for you. Okay, I'm going to get the rest of this cleaned up. Okay, so I have got everything ready to paint. It's, you know, I've sanded, I washed it in alcohol, let it all dry, made sure there's no dust or anything left on them, and I'm going to go to paint. I'm going to show you how I hold the parts, you know, because if I'm doing a plastic model, a lot of times I will just paint parts on the tree, you know, like so here. And then later on, when I cut them off, touch them up with a little paintbrush of the same color. It's very minimal cleanup on them that way. I'll do that a lot of times, but not every time. But when it comes to this 3D stuff, you know, it doesn't come on anything like that. So you do have to get creative. And let me show you a couple examples. One of them is just using, like in this case, it's just a little piece of wood, like a wooden roller. This is just a piece of wood, and I'm using just regular old painter's tape, the blue stuff, because it's stickier than my frog tape that I use for painting. And I just double it back. You know, you just pull it back and double it on itself like so, and then stick it on your board. So that's what I got here. So these are a bunch of things that are, let me get the light up here. So these are a bunch of things that the backside isn't going to show. And they're small little details. So you can just tape them down on your wood like this. Just be careful. Make sure you stick them down really, really good. And when I go to the spray booth, I'll just hold that and airbrush it. And then I could just set it to the side. Okay, so then there's going to be parts where, let's see, let me find an example. Like this engine block and oil pan. There are places where you could go on the backside with your alligator clips and your skewers and get them clamped. Okay. Then there's going to be things that are just no good place to clamp. For example, exhaust headers. So what I've done here is I've got an alligator clip, and I'm just in the most inconspicuous spot I can find. And I'll just touch that up later. And then there's going to be items where, for example, these air cleaners. Okay, there was no place to really grab it unless you wanted to grab right where it gets painted. So in this case, I'm using a little bit of this blue tack, and there's a link for that in my description. But I just pinch off a little bit of that blue sticky tack, and I stick it up in the back side, and then clamp on with an alligator clip. Okay. And also on small parts, here's another air cleaner, and I just did this for an example. Instead of using an alligator clip, I am using half of a toothpick here, you know, could use that. And then also, these bricks that I'm using, these are the flower arrangement bricks you can get at like a craft store like Hobby Lobby or whatever. And, you know, there are 4 sides to it. And as you can see, I've been reusing this quite a bit. Same here. This one's a little bit more worn out, but now I'm using this side here. And you get 5 or 6 bricks for fairly cheap. And once they're totally used up, just throw them away and get new ones. Okay, next I'll show you how I do the wheels. Okay, so when it comes to holding 3D tires and wheels, this is the way I like to do it. So I'm using one of my alligator clips and a skewer. And this is just a piece of cardstock that I cut like a strip. And what I'll do is I'll get the get that inside the tire, and then I'll expand it without going out the front here. I'll expand it, hold it with one of my fingers there, and then put an alligator clip right where the 2 edges come together. And that puts just enough tension on the wheel where you can spray it. And I make sure that the outside of that tire, if there's a preference, the one that's going to show to the outside, that's in this up position where you can paint it better, whereas back here, just slightly more difficult to paint. But that's what I do there. And then for the wheels, you know, these 3D printed wheels go in through the tire, and they're already a tight friction fit almost on most of the 3D printed. So I take a piece of tape and I wrap it around the wheel, and it just gives me a little something to hold on to with my alligator clip. And that way I can spray, and on the back side, carefully just get in there and spray. If you guys have any better ideas, leave them in the comments and share them with us, but that's the way I do it. And then there's also, on some wheels, there's an extra ring that goes in behind the wheel tire to give it like a deep dish look. And I kind of do the same thing. Wrap some tape around it, and it gives me a place to hold on to. At this stage, I'm just going to go to primer. And you can use any kind of primer you want. I'm going to use the Kaleido Gloss Black primer. It's a water-based primer. And I've already tested it. If you do the water-based primer, you can top coat with the acrylics from Kaleido, but you can also top coat with enamels or lacquers. The trick there is you got to let it cure out really well, at least 24 hours or more. And then when your first coat of either lacquer or enamel goes on, spray it extremely light for the first coat or two to allow it to create a barrier where it's not too hot, it's not flooded with solvents, and that'll create a barrier before you lay your paint on wetter. So, okay, so we'll meet you at the booth. Okay, so I'm using the Kaleido Gloss Primer right out of the bottle. Doesn't need any cutting or anything. It's ready to spray. Just pouring some into my bowl there. And then I always make sure I clean that lid real good and seal it up too when I'm all done. And I'm using my Mobius 0.3 millimeter airbrush, and air pressure is about 20 psi. And I am just going to spray medium wet coats, and generally only one good wet coat will do it. If you see any light spots, you can go back. And always test out a spoon first, just to make sure it's spraying real well. Okay, so we'll go ahead and speed this up, but I'll leave the footage intact so you can see the spray process. Okay, so I primed and cured everything, my 3D printed stuff here. But anyway, so what I've done now is I'm going to separate by colors. And I'm going to paint this all in one session. And what you do there is you start out with your lightest color and work your way to your darkest color. And then I'll just have some hot or very warm tap water in a cup and a pipette, and I'll just keep rinsing out my gun until it sprays clear, and then I'll go to my next color. And then only when I'm all done will I do my thorough cleaning of my brush. So everything is sorted here, starting with the oil filter and the aftermarket Edelbrock air filter. I'm going to spray Kaleido white, and the white on the air cleaner is just for the filament of the air cleaner, and then later that'll get masked off, and I'm going to be doing spray chrome on the top, and of course the oil filter is going to be white. Okay, then I'm going to do some black. My valve covers are going to be black, and then I'm going to do like a highlight on the top raised letters where it says Cobra, and a couple other pieces that I just didn't get covered real good with the primer. Because if you get it covered really good with the primer, you don't even need to repaint them. But I'm going to hit those again with Kaleido straight black instead of their primer. Now, speaking of living with the parts after primer, is I did sort some that are either going to stay the color that they are, or I can just hand brush or hand paint before assembly. Okay, and then also I'm labeling everything. So I have my black on this little stick here, but I also have some carburetors. And carburetors I'm going to go with Scorched Gold Kaleido. Okay, then I've got my intake and my heads. And, you know, this isn't going to be a 1960 engine. This is an aftermarket resto mod, so it's going to be a more modern rebuilt engine. So it's going to have aluminum heads. So I'm using Kaleido aluminum from the Metal Colors line. All right, then I'm going to go with my blue parts, typical Ford blue. Except for instead of an exact color match for Ford blue, I am using Kaleido blue. And then for my exhaust manifolds, I haven't decided yet if I'm going to go with my stock manifolds or headers. So I'm going to paint both, and I'm going to hit the transmission while I'm at it. And for that, I'm going to use Kaleido gunmetal. I'm not worried about painting the kit parts yet, because what I'm really trying to do here is get my 3D parts all painted and assembled so that I can go to assembly and then try to start dry fitting and fitting those into the model kit. And that's going to be before the model kit's built. So let's get over to the booth. Just like the primer, it's going to be the Mobius 0.3 millimeter with a 20 psi pressure. And I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through this, but as I said, I start with my lightest color first, in this case white, and then I'll work my way to my darker colors. So I'm going to speed this footage up, and I'll just have a text there every time I change colors. And notice too, I'll keep the cleaning in between there, where you'll see that I'm cleaning with some hot water. In fact, I got a mug right there with some hot water there. So let's speed this up and take a look at all the colors being done. I haven't really shown this before, so I thought I would take you through how I clean the gun after spraying all my acrylics. So I start out by, once again, flushing with just good warm tap water. And I'll just run that through the airbrush over and over and over again until it starts to spray clear. Then after that very first rinse, I'll take my paper towel and I'll wipe the inside of that bowl just to get the majority of the paint out of the way. Others may do it different, but this is the way I do it. And then I'll add some more warm water and flush it again, once again till clean. As I see the spray getting cleaner and cleaner, I will then take my damp paper towel and put it right at the front and press the seal off the front. I'll pull that trigger and that back flushes it and will blow bubbles up through the cup there, and it just back flushes and that helps clean it out, and then I'll finish rinsing it out. Keep doing that until it's absolutely clear, and then at that point I'll put the Kaleido cleaner in there, or whatever acrylic cleaner you're going to use, and I will put that inside the bowl, and I'll take a little clean brush and I'll kind of brush around and clean that bowl a little bit and stir that around a little bit, and then I'll run that through the gun. And then with the cleaning solution, I'll do one more back flush. And after I rinse out the gun totally, then I begin my disassembly. Okay, at this point, it's ready for disassembly, so I'll have a little pink cup there with my cleaning solution in it, and I'll remove the tip of the airbrush, and then make sure I pull the little nozzle out as well, and throw those right into the cleaning cup there. Then I'll unscrew the back of the airbrush and loosen the holder, the lockdown for the needle, loosen that a little bit, and I'll push my needle out through the front. I don't pull it backwards because that can draw all that wet or dirty paint back into your gun. Then I will take my cleaner and also wipe down my needle real well. Okay, and then I'll also take my cup off, and that's as far as I disassemble it. Once in a while I'll totally tear it down for a clean out, maybe a couple times a year, but in most cases this is it. And then I'll just take a little paintbrush and clean as much as I can with that. And then I also have some little pipe cleaners that I'll hone through there, and just kind of keep cleaning it out and scrubbing it and rinsing it out. And then once I got the gun itself clean, I will tackle the tip and the nozzle and the paint cup there, and I'll just use my paintbrush and kind of clean everything up. Now sometimes, especially when you're waiting long between coats or doing all those multiple colors, there are parts of the cup, like the top upper half of the cup, that'll get dried paint and very hard to clean with that acrylic paint cleaner. So that little glass container does have lacquer thinner, and that's all I'm using it for, is just to clean that bowl and maybe the outside of the gun. But I am not running that through the acrylics because it'll gum up. See, I'm showing no, don't do that. Okay, and then finally I still have the tip and the nozzle itself to clean, and I will just take a little paintbrush there and clean those up the best I can on the outside, and then I will flush that out. I'll just use the little pipette and I'll run some fluid through those, and I finish up with a needle cleaner tool, and it's kind of honed and tapered to fit almost like a needle would be, and I'll just put that in and spin it a little bit, and that kind of scrubs the walls of the nozzle. And then when I'm all done, I like to just let everything just sit there and dry out. I'll actually leave it all sitting and dry until my next spray session. There are some people that like to leave fluid in the bowl, but I prefer to let everything dry out. Then I just reassemble in reverse order. Okay, so everything's been allowed to cure for about 24 hours per the recommendations of Kaleido, and now I'm just inspecting it. And I gotta tell you what, those paints are beautiful, like the metal colors. Look at that gunmetal. That really just looks so good on that transmission. And using that black primer, it just brings out the highlights of the nooks and crannies. So I don't worry about spraying deep into the nooks and crannies and flooding it, because I like that black to kind of show through. So in the air filter itself, I just sprayed the outside diameter there where the the filter media shows, and then what I'll be doing is later on masking that off and doing spray chrome on the top of it. So at this point, it's ready for assembly, and being that it is 3D printed resin parts, you must use super glue. And also use super glue even on styrene if it's paint-to-paint surface, so unless you scrape it away. So I use a little applicator on the top of that, which gives me a nice fine control of my glue. And I will start assembling the pieces. Okay, so I'm going to start assembling, and I will go fast forward on this. And I just use my super glue very sparingly, just a little drop on each piece or each corner. I don't flood it. No glue bombs here. All right, we'll go to fast forward. Okay, so next up, I'm decorating my valve covers. Haven't decided which one to use yet, but I've got the Ford Oval, and I've got the black one with the raised Cobra and cooling fins on it. And the way I'm doing that is I'm doing it's sort of like a pad printing method, where I'm taking one of my acrylic markers here, and I'll demonstrate it. I'll spread a little bit of that right on the end of my little popsicle stick here. It's kind of a smooth one. I sanded that surface a little bit smooth. And then I'll take that valve cover and as carefully as I can, go straight down like so to leave an imprint. Sometimes you have to do it more than once. There you go. So we have a really nice Ford oval there. And if you get too much on there, so you just take a damp little cotton swab and some water, and then you can just carefully wipe on the paint where that got, because that was a water-based marker. Okay, then we'll do the raised letter on the other valve cover. Just kind of spreading that about. And even though it's a pain in the neck, I put the lid on, even if it's only a minute. It's just to make sure that that don't dry up on me. So once again, I'll press down. And sometimes you need to re-ink it a little bit. The Cobra the word Cobra didn't cover extremely well. Okay, so that's how that's done. So let's get back into a little bit more fast forward motion for some more of that assembly. Alright, so now it's time to do some spark plug wiring. So I'm going to be using the Morgan Automotive distributor and wires. I really like their kit, and you know, for $5 you can't beat it. I think it's one of the more realistic distributors out there. So I'm going to drill it all out and install that. So once again, we'll speed up the footage here. I'm noticing on these engine kits is whether it's the stock air cleaner or an aftermarket air cleaner, it doesn't seem to matter. There's no spacer or anything that they give you that fits between the carburetors. Carburetor and air cleaner like a real car would have. So to glue that air cleaner on, you know, it doesn't adhere good. It has a different diameter, different profile. Doesn't quite fit the carburetor at all. And same with the Airbrush aftermarket carburetor. It's just kind of wanky here, you know. So what I did is I went out to my garage and I found these little washers. And if I go too high and glue them inside the Airbrush here, they just happen to fit around the horn ring of the carburetor. and I'll be able to glue that into place like so. It makes the air cleaner a little high, but if I'm going to be modifying the car anyways, I should be able to deal with that. But now I got a nice positive fit. It doesn't want to rock or anything. It glues right around the carburetor. Headers on there, the valve covers. I did the wiring. Right now I've got the belts and pulleys and AC and power steering. Just bring out some highlights on that. And I'm using gray. I don't want it to be in your face black. And here's a look at the final 3D parts all assembled and ready to go into the car. Now it's off to the modifications to fit everything in there. Well, that concludes part one of the 1960 Ford Starliner build. So now that we have all the 3D parts made up and completed and assembled, now we can mock up the car. So the next episode, we're going to do a mock-up and all the modifications necessary to fit everything into the car, slam it way down to the ground, body prep and paint. So stay tuned. See you next time, folks.